What is up, guys? Welcome to this YouTube tutorial about how to do some basic verse coding with Unreal Engine for Fortnite. This is Dogman with Last Earth Labs, and today I'm just going to be showing you how to set up some basics. For instance, we're going to be showing how to make a player map, how to add players to that player map, how to add a custom player class, and how to check to see if players are joining late or leaving early and adjust our code according to such. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go ahead and start by adding a new verse file. I've done that by right-clicking here on the Verse Explorer, and you can click your project and add a new verse file project. We've gone ahead and add this winter device.verse.
So if we open that up, we can see that it's empty code. All we have is the class, and the onBegin function which just simply prints begin. So to get started, let's go ahead and define our player class, or player map, excuse me. So we're going to have a variable here, and we're going to call it just player map. And that is going to be made up of a player, who is part of our custom player class. And we're going to just set that equal to a map. And it's giving me an error here because we have not defined our custom player class yet. So let's just go ahead and do that to eliminate that error. Today we're making a kind of tycoon sort of game where players gather resources and build currency over time. So we're going to want to make a custom player class that has an currency included and also has the unlocked rooms included. So we can start by doing that by just above this we can make another class above our winter device. We can make another class. And we're going to just call this class custom player. So to make up our custom player class, we're going to add a few parameters. Firstly, the first thing we need for our custom player class is, I forgot an equal sign here. The first thing we need for our custom player class is, as you may have guessed, a player. So our player is simply going to be a player, and we're going to define it as a player. Then we're going to create a variable called currency, which is our in-game currency that players will be collecting throughout the game. That's just going to be an int, and we're going to, for now, just set that equal to 0. After that, we can have an array of unlocked areas. So we can define that as unlocked areas. And that is going to be an array of integers. Okay, great. So now that we have our custom players class, one thing we're going to want to do in the future too, we don't really need it right now, but we are going to want to display this currency on screen. So let's go ahead and just create a text box for the currency also. So that's just going to be a text block. And we'll just define it as a text block. Cool. So now we have our custom player class all set up. It does not like this because I did not do this. Okay, yes. So now we have our custom. Yes, we are not using the UI, so we need to add that. So we're going to using here on the top, we're going to do Fortnite. And if you go over this error, you can see what the error is usually. So it's saying, did you forget to specify using Fortnite.com/UI? So yes, we did. And we're going to add that right now. Fortnite.com/UI. So that clears that error, and now we're able to access this text block. So once we've created our custom player, and we have a map made up of custom players, then we can go ahead and check for these players joining and add them to our player map. So if we do that, we probably for now are going to do that on the onBegin function, but in later, depending on how your game starts, if you have a pre-game lobby or something like that, another thing you can do is subscribe to a teleporter event or whatever starts your game, and then actually add players to the player map whenever you'd like. If you'd like to do it when they're teleported to start the game or whenever the game actually starts, it's kind of up to you. It might work different for different scenarios. So before we begin, let's go ahead and listen for if players join late. So we're gonna in our winter class here, we're just gonna on our onBegin function, we're gonna go ahead and subscribe to that. So we can just do our get place command. And then we can use a player added event. Oh, don't need a capital right there. And then we can subscribe to a function that we have not yet created, but we will create right now, which will be called onNewPlayers. And it's going to give me an error here just because I've not written this function yet. But what we're doing here is we're just getting the entire play space, and then we're listening for any player joining, which is a player added event, and then we're just going to subscribe to this onNewPlayers function. So let's go ahead and define this onNewPlayers function. So we can go here. We're going to want to do this on the same line as on the same indentation as onBegin, and we can just call this onNewPlayers. And we are going to feed in here an agent of type agent. So now we have our onNewPlayers function. We've corrected this error, so we're no longer red highlighted, but we do have an error here because there's nothing actually defined in this function. So first thing we're going to do is, if we have something we're going to try to subscribe them to, we can go ahead and subscribe them to. For other games, you might be subscribing to elimination events, you might be subscribing to damage event, depending on how your game is structured. But for now, all we are going to do is just add them to our player map. So what we can do is we can just say if not player map. So let's do if player, I need to stop capitalizing the second thing, cast equals player agent, which is the agent that we're feeding in when we call this. Then we can check to see if they are in the player map. So if not player map, and then we're checking for this specific player, so we're going to check the player cast. So if they're not part of the player map, then what we're going to do is set them to the player map. So let's just say set player map player cast. So set cannot be used on its own, so we need to go ahead and include this in an if statement here. So if set player cast, then excuse me, we need to go ahead and define this. So set player mass, we need to set it equal to something. So we can just set this equal to, just one more second, we can set it equal to our custom player. And I think we need to go ahead and define this, so we can just say here the player is the player cast, the currency is, we can just set it to 0 for now, and our unlocked trails, we can set that in a second. So okay, so we need to define this. If we cannot set that, so I was right originally, and we do need to define it, encase this in an if statement here. There we go. Okay, so all we're doing is if a player joins, we're just going to add them to the player map here, and we're just going to set their currency to 0. So that is good for now as far as listening for on players entering the game if they join late. Again, what we're doing is we're subscribing on the onBegin function to listen for players joining late, and if they are joining late, we're just adding them to our player map for now. A couple other things we want to do is we want to go ahead and add people to the player map through if they just join normally. So if they don't join late, if they join at the beginning of the game, they should also be added to the player map. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a function called on player spawned. We will be using spawn pads for this map, so we can just go ahead and create a function called on player spawned. And we're also going to feed in an agent of type agent here. And okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, and we're just going to, we can actually just copy and paste this here. And same thing, if once they're spawned, if they're not in the player map, we're just going to add them to the player map and set their currency to 0. So one thing we like to do is you can use these nice tags within Unreal Engine for Fortnite, and we can set the tags to have a tag, which then we can reference through verse. So what we like to do is we like to tag all of our spawners with a class tag. So up here, we can just use this spawner class tag. We need to import this, so we need to use verse.org simulator /tags, so we can actually access that. /tags, excuse me. Oh, no, /T tags. So now we can access that. So now every spawner that we include this class tag of spawner will be referenced here. And the way we actually do that is we can go and we can call that in our onBegin function. So during our onBegin function, when the game starts, we can check to see if players have spawned via the spawn pads, and if they have, we can go ahead and subscribe them to this also. So what we can do is we can, in our onBegin function, we can include here, so we can do for found tagged object, and then we can use the find creative objects with tag, and the tag is going to be our spawner tag. So we can just say spawner, and then we can use this. This to look for it. So for every objects that tagged with spawner, we're gonna look, and then we're gonna say if we find one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna subscribe to our player spawned function. So if found device equals player spawner device, if we have a device with the tag spawner and it's a player spawner device, does not need to be capitalized, within our found tagged objects. Oh, and that is a typo. So we are going to just add a simple print statement so we can track this. And we're just going to say here init spawn, so we can see when the spawns are initializing. And then we can subscribe to that event and listen. We can listen for a spawned event from the spawn pads. And every time there's a spawned event, we can go ahead and set up our players. We don't actually need an agent there. We actually don't need an agent. We can't feed an agent on begin, so I don't think we need to though. Yes, we don't need to feed an agent there. So yeah, we're all good. So what we're doing here is we're checking for all the objects with the tag spawner, and then if one of those objects is a player spawner device, on a spawned event, we're going to subscribe to this, and we're just going to add them to a player map with a currency of 0. So if we go to our UEFN here and we go to our outliner, what we can do here is we can add, I'm not sure if there's any spawners already in here. Let me check. So there's not any spawners already in here, so I can go ahead and just add a spawner. And we're going to add a player spawner. So we can add a player spawner here. There we go. And then what we can do is with our player spawner, we if we get the details of this player spawner, we can add, using this button, add new component to this adder. We can add a tag. So if we search tag, first markup tag, and then let's go ahead and add a tag. So we might have to build our verse code here first. So what we can do is build our verse code, or compile our verse code. And see, now we have this spawner tag from our code. So then we add it to the spawner. So then every time someone is spawned through the spawner, because it has a spawner tag, it will print init spawn, and then we will add them to the player map. So that is great. What we should do now is check to see what if players leave. We are going to want to also remove them from the player map, because we don't want players in the player map who obviously are not active. So one thing we can do is we can just listen for a function for when players leave. So we can go back to our onBegin function once again, and what we can do is we can get the play space once more, and we can just copy and paste this, and then instead of a player added event, what we're going to do is listen for a player removed event. So every time a player is removed, but we don't want to subscribe to the same onNewPlayers function, because that is adding them to the player map. What we want to do is create a new function called maybe leaving player or something like this, or we can just call it on new players. We can call this on, oops, and then we want to tab this over a couple times. So then we can call this on leaving players. And in our onBegin function, we can listen for players leaving here. So we're going to go up here and listen to, on a player removed event, we're going to listen to on leaving players. So there we go. Now we have tracking for if a player joins or if a player leaves. We do need to adjust this function to remove them from the map. So we can just do something similar here, where if we, if player map player cast, then we can set the player map player cast to null here. We cannot. So what we can do here to check to see if a player is leaving, we're going to need to remove them from the player's map. So we can just change this onPlayer leaving function that we've already subscribed to on onBegin to just remove a player from the player map. So what we're going to start with is we're just going to say if player, we'll call it act player, if act player equals player map agent. I cannot type today. Then, so if the player is part of the player map, Then we're going to create a new player map, a temporary player map, and so we can just call that var, this needs to be indented, var temp player map, a map made up of players, a map of type player is feeding it a map made up of custom players, which is the class we made earlier. I apologize, the audio cut out here, so I'm re-recording the audio over the video. But yes, so what we're doing is we're editing this on leaving player function, and we're going to create a temporary player map that does not have the player who is leaving, and then we're going to compare that map to our existing player map, and then we're just going to combine them so we remove the player who's leaving from our original player map. So that's what we're doing here when we're adding these lines to the on leaving player function. So yes, all we're doing again is we are creating a temporary map without the player, and then comparing that to our original player map, and then combining them to remove the player who left. And just to summarize what we did here, we subscribed to the play space, the player added event, and the player removed event. Then we created these functions in which we subscribe on new players if a player joins. We have our on player spawned if a player does spawn from our tag spawn pet, and our on leaving player if a player does leave early. And then we have our custom player class, which has currency, unlocked areas, and currency text block. We'll be using that later to customize UI and sort players and sort how many currencies they have. But yeah, that's basically it for this video. This is how to track players and track if they leave or enter and assign them specific values.